Well, hello again. We're back for another in our series of Meet the Managers. So we have another, this is Downing Part 2, because we had Downing with Warren Rogers. If you've seen our other videos, if you haven't, please go and check it out. But here's our second in our series with Downing. We're very pleased to have Koujiro and Matt from Downing. Guys, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, I'll start. I'll get the ball rolling. So, yeah, I'm Koujiro Tambara. I'm the principal at Downing Ventures. So I have been at Downing for about 2.5 years now, and I combine a sort of healthcare and life sciences and an early stage business background. So I did my PhD at Cambridge University in chemistry. And before joining Downing, I used to work at an early stage business that came out of the Textiles Accelerator program. Over to you, Matt.
Fantastic. Matt.
Hi, great to be here. I'm Matt Pierce. I'm the healthcare associate in the Downing Ventures team. I've got an educational background in biotechnology and biochemistry, and started my career at Deloitte, qualifying as a chartered accountant, and now in healthcare investment.
Brilliant, thank you very much. It sounds like you're both chemists or biology experts turned venture capitalists in that sense. So perfect people to talk about healthcare today, which I know is what you guys want to talk about, and that's kind of the theme for the next 20-25 minutes or so. So do you want to give us your kind of philosophy around healthcare? Why is it a good investment sector? Yeah, just start the ball rolling for us.
Yeah, so I'll kick that one off. So we see it very clearly. So in very simple terms, where there's people, there's a need for healthcare. It's always been that way, always will be. Now, when you're talking about healthcare and life sciences, given everything that's gone on the past 15 months, I think it's quite hard to avoid the C word, COVID.
Yeah. We managed about 2 minutes, I think. Yeah, normal.
But our view is that sort of COVID has, all it's done is shine a spotlight on all of the trends that were already there and bring it forward sort of to the tune of about 5 to 10 years. Even before that, healthcare and life sciences had very sort of favorable tailwinds, probably principal among them the sort of aging demographics. And specifically within the UK, the UK has always had a sort of world-class tertiary education and R&D infrastructure, in our opinion. And I think the race in developing the vaccine, the achievements of Oxford and AstraZeneca highlight that very nicely. So yeah, we therefore think that healthcare and life sciences is a very sort of timely and fertile area for investment opportunities, and we're really excited to be in that space.
I think just adding on from Koujiro there, just on the vaccine, I think right now governments are really aware of how vital a strong life science and healthcare sector is, and how much of strategic importance there is in funneling resource into that. And so right now, I think is a great time to be looking at healthcare, because we're going to see a lot of changes over the next few years in the aftermath, where I think there's going to be a lot more money spent on preparing and making sure that there's resource available to react quickly and nimbly to hopefully catch this a lot quicker, and have much more control over a future pathogen or virus.
And do you think it's all sustainable? Because I say the spotlight's on healthcare at the moment because of what's happening, obviously. But as we move forward and as we kind of move away from this, will the spotlight fall away? And one of the things we talk to government about quite a lot at our level is trying to help particular sectors, biotech, medtech, all sectors that, because they're so early stage and it takes a while to kind of come through and get revenue, profit, it's difficult for investors to invest. It takes such a long time. So they want us to put money into this area, but it's traditionally been difficult. So as I say, long way around of asking, do you think it's all sustainable?
I think hopefully it is sustainable. I think one of the main things that COVID has done in the last year or 18 months has really shone a light on the UK as being a really good source of quality R&D and IP. And I hope that goes forward. But I think historically within the UK, we've been quite poor at fostering innovation all the way from the lab through to IPO and onwards. I think a lot of biotech companies get very frustrated when they're hit commercial milestones and they're doing well, but they just don't have aggressive funders that can really see what technology they have and the applicable market and potential returns that can bring. I think the US is a very good place for them to go. And I hope after what's happened in the UK and how we've demonstrated that we've got great innovation here and great paths to market, to get things approved quickly, that the UK will really pick up in biotech and healthcare. Kouj, maybe add something onto that.
Yeah, no, I think you've covered it. Yeah, covered it off nicely. Nothing to add from me.
And you mentioned the B word in terms of biotech there. One of the things we're trying to do in this series is kind of create a bit of a glossary of terms. That we kind of ban these terms around like biotech, medtech. I'm sure you guys understand what they mean. Could you just give us a very brief explanation on the difference between biotech and medtech?
Yeah, so for us, I'll sort of frame it slightly different in terms of the sort of the bigger picture in terms of the difference between sort of healthcare and then life sciences, because that's a slightly bigger umbrella term that gets banned. So for us, healthcare relates to sort of provision of care. So any innovation that allows institutions to administer that provision of care more effectively, we put in the sort of healthcare camp. Whereas life sciences, we sort of define that as those sort of R&D heavy businesses that provide the therapies, the drugs, the solutions that the healthcare institutions can then administer. So that's the sort of framing that we apply. And then within that, obviously, yes, if you've got the sort of various different medtech, biotech within those, but that's a sort of broad sort of, umbrella that we see, the sort of lens that we see the world through.
On the biotechnology piece, I think one of the key themes within biotechnology is using biological phenomena and repurposing it for maybe it might be manufacturing something. For example, one of the great first instances of great biotechnology was the production of penicillin and using microbes to grow at industrial levels antibiotics, and that subsequently has, I guess, become less and less biotech as it's become more and more chemically synthesized and scaled. But that initial, right, okay, there's something interesting going on in bacteria or yeast or whatever the microbe may be. They can make this thing very complicated, protein or chemical. They can do it very efficiently. Let's use that for medicine. And I think, the life sciences, and especially more of the chemistry end of things, is very good at looking at those complex biological processes that are producing an end product and going, okay, how can we kind of back solve that so that we can really scale it? So I think there's lots of different niche areas within life sciences, but as Kouj mentioned, I think they all kind of feed into that provision of care within the healthcare market.
Yeah, and I guess your guys' role as kind of fund managers or portfolio managers is to commercialize science, biology, chemistry, and basically make some revenue out of it. And I guess like every VC, every great fund manager, you've got themes or philosophies. Do you want to talk us through your themes?
Yeah, so I'll kick that one off. So we've got, 4 thematics that we invest along, like any good investor should. Now, I'll take the first one, then I'll hand over to Matt before I sort of wrap up on the 4th. So the first sort of thematic that we follow is sort of personalization. So what does that mean? Well, this is relating to the development of drugs or therapies for a person, as opposed to for a disease, which is this much more traditional interpretation. And these can be, for traditional sort of drugs, antibiotics or biologics. But in this world, it sort of also includes digital therapeutics, as well as companion diagnostics. Okay. Matt, do you want to take a point of care?
Yeah, I think the next one sort of leads on quite well. Future pharma is a theme that we've coined, and it's really looking at what are the pharmaceutical companies doing today. What's coming through the pipeline in terms of innovation that is going to change what they're doing tomorrow. And as Kouj mentioned, as things are getting more personalized, I think, as I just previously mentioned about, taking something that's very complicated, but the biology does very well at making and sort of deconstructing that and making it more scalable, that's an area that we really like to get invested in. I think a good example of that is one of our portfolio companies, Touchlight. They've patented a way of chemically synthesizing DNA, which currently is made through growing microbes, a little bit similar to the method that I described for antibiotics. DNA is one of the key primers for making mRNA vaccines, and that's been one of the barriers to scale that the virus vaccine companies are having to battle with, and Touchlight is hopefully well positioned to sort of help solve some of those challenges. So that's an area we quite like. Another one of our core themes is point of care. And again, I think, as Kouj mentioned earlier, bringing trends forward, I think point of care has really come through well. And what I mean by point of care, it's decentralizing the healthcare system, both in a treatment sense and diagnostics. So again, to drop the C-bomb, if we're talking about COVID, you haven't had to drive to the hospital to get a test. You haven't had to drive to the hospital to get a vaccine. It's been much more decentralized. There's walk-ins, there's drive-throughs, and so it's all becoming a little bit more efficient, where the patient doesn't have to travel all around the place to go to these centralized institutions. And that trend is happening through two things: increased portability and usability in the hardware, but then also software enabling people that potentially would have needed 5 to 10 years of training and experience to read the output of some of these diagnostics. So a good example of that would be ultrasound. Very, very difficult thing to look at and intuitively go, oh, that's my child's left leg there. It's very complicated to look at. And so if we can use AI to help a clinician go and highlight in the areas that are of key interest, and even quantitatively give some analysis, it suddenly means that you don't need to be a 10-year cardiologist to read that sonogram. You can be maybe on the front line in an ambulance, quickly checking someone's heart health or something. And so I hope that makes sense. But you can see that hopefully through decentralization and empowering people on the front lines to be able to do more and add more value, healthcare becomes more efficient and better outcomes for patients.
And then I guess the fourth sort of thematic that we go along is moving from a world of intervention towards prevention. Now, what does that actually mean? Well, very simply, it means it's much better to stop someone getting ill than it is to intervene once they are ill. So I'll try and make it a little bit more real, and I'll take the example of sort of within digital health. So, we start with a sort of high level view that healthcare institutions around the world are bogged down with things like under-resourcing and too much sort of bureaucracy, and they're at overcapacity. So they're so busy doing their just day jobs that their uptake in terms of taking up digital solutions has been slow relative to other sectors. But the digitization is taking hold within healthcare, and as you do so, what you get is this buildup of a very rich patient data set. And as you democratize that, so putting that data set back into the hands of the end users, you and I, what that allows us is to make better informed decisions about our own lifestyle, right? So if we can do that, then our sort of reliance on the healthcare institutions reduces. So we don't have to go to the hospital quite so much. And that allows them to focus their resources, their bandwidth on the sort of much more specialist intervention types. So those are sorts of four thematics that we sort of invest along.
Yeah, and it's always an interesting area. I think I'm reading Bill Bryson's book about short history of the Earth, and one of the things he talks about is, I think in the 19th century, they felt science was done. They'd learned as much as they could ever learn. They were all finished. It was all over and done with, and basically they could pack their bags up. And then they kind of started the micro world and the small miniature world that they'd never really understood was about. And I think it just goes to show that everything's changing and evolving. And it feels like, from what you guys are saying, if I'm listening correctly, that healthcare is still slightly behind some other sectors, certainly digitally, and there's a lot of exciting areas, and I guess for potential investors, exciting investment areas that they can get involved with here. And there's some great companies. I think you mentioned, was it Light Touch you mentioned a minute ago?
Touchlight, yeah, Touchlight.
Apologies. But have you got any more in the portfolio that either have kind of come through and be successes, or any that you're going to be investing into and can tell us a little bit about?
Yeah, so I think another company that's right at the heart of point of care is a company called Adaptix, and that's looking to make 2D and 3D X-ray much more portable. So at the moment, when you go and get an X-ray, I don't know when the last time that you were unfortunate enough to break a bone or anything.
A while ago, but yeah.
you go to the X-ray department, and there's a huge machine that is wheeled across the ceiling and has all sorts of infrastructure around it, and is operated by quite experienced people that require training, the maintenance, just the power that the machine requires, I think is thousands of volts. Whereas Adaptix has come up with a flat panel technology. I guess the step change in how X-ray is working is a little bit like your old cathode ray tube TV, if you remember how large those things were. And now we have a very, you'd have a single source of cathodes throwing electrons at the screen, and that would be how you watch TV. Now we have LEDs, which has got, I'm going to completely make a number up here, but thousands of LEDs, presumably in a huge HD display, which is giving us a much more rich and sometimes 3D look at what we're viewing. And so Adaptix has taken that approach in developing point of care X-ray for orthopedics. So taking care of hand, wrist fractures, elbows, feet. The hope is to scale that and for it to become useful across all applications. And again, that's just the start. It's getting that into the hands of the people that need it, the orthopedic surgeon, the physiotherapist, potentially, all these people that currently have to refer people off to go and get X-rays done, hopefully will be able to get that done in the place that they're receiving treatment or being assessed. And again, just one other change is the large power usage. Adaptix is able to run this thing off a standard plug socket, which I think is really, really revolutionary. And there's a couple of companies operating in the space, and we're happy to be sponsoring one of them.
Yeah, I'll give an example along the sort of intervention to prevention thematic. Now, I gave that example back then of the digital health, and I'm going to go slightly jump onto sort of the medical devices bit of that. There's a company in our portfolio called Invisius. Now, this is a spin out from the University of Edinburgh, and what they are doing is addressing that pain point of when you go onto dialysis, regardless of what age you go onto dialysis, because of the sort of effects of going on to having these dialysis sessions on a weekly basis, it reduces your sort of the expected lifespan that you've got quite drastically. And the reason for that is you hook your body up to the dialysis machine, blood gets pumped across it, and by the time it comes back into your body, the immune system proteins in your blood have been activated, and over time, that activated blood attacks your cardiovascular system. So what Invisius are trying to do is to commercialize a sort of coating technology that applies an invisibility cloak, hence the company name Invisius, to the inner linings of the tubings and the machinery, such that the patients, their cardiovascular systems aren't getting attacked, we can move that sort of patients away from having to intervene once their cardiovascular systems are getting degraded over time, moving it towards preventing that need for the healthcare once they've been on dialysis in the first place. So those are two examples from our portfolio.
It's great, thank you. Yeah, it's always great to hear examples, real life examples of what you guys are investing in, and particularly in the healthcare sector where it's doing obviously such good things, number one, but obviously hopefully the company will go on and do well for investors at the same time. But I'm guessing it's not just you two who are the team, but there's a whole kind of infrastructure behind you at Downing. Could you just tell us a bit more about the team and the kind of the wider Downing effect in that sense? Yeah,
so Matt and I, we work at Downing Ventures, which is the venture capital arm, if you like, of parent company Downing LLP. Now, Downing Ventures itself has a team of 12, and within that, there's 3 that are dedicated to healthcare and life sciences. Now, obviously, you're talking to 2 of them, and the team is headed up by a man called Will Brooks. Now, he's got 30 years under his belt within the industry, specifically within healthcare and life sciences. And he has a track record of successfully returning cash to his investors. So that's a sort of setup within Downing Ventures. And we're supported by a global network of venture partners. So we've got venture partners based in Israel and also in the US, West Coast. So our sort of investment activity in healthcare and life sciences has been going from 2014. We've got a specialist team that is dedicated to the healthcare and life sciences strategy that we're really excited to be a part of.
Sure. Okay, and just last question, just to finish things off. I want to invest in this area, but I don't quite understand, obviously, all the technical bits and bobs that perhaps we talked about today, or that we see in some of the companies that you're talking about. What kind of reassuring messages would you give an investor who's thinking of kind of dipping their toe into the healthcare sector and investing here?
Yeah, so I think the key one is that, you know, the point that I touched on at the start of this conversation is that, you know, the UK healthcare and life sciences sector is backed by world-class sort of infrastructure. It is a timely, very timely opportunity, and for those reasons, yeah, we think that it's a very fertile time to be investing in healthcare and life sciences, and specifically within Downing. Yeah, you know, we've been investing into this space for years now. Our track record shows that. And yeah, you've got a specialist team within a, you know, big organization, parent organization, that is focused on healthcare and life sciences. So
I think just to add on to that as well, you know, shameless plug for the EIS and SEIS structures that we have in the UK. I think you're really, really well suited for healthcare and life science, where it's a long journey. It takes time for these companies to develop value. The science has to be well established to underpin the product. The product then has to go through the product development and regulatory pathways. Then it gets to market, and then it needs to be marketed. So, you know, if you're looking at some enterprise SaaS businesses, we've made the product and we can sell it, which need to ramp up sales. It's a longer journey in healthcare, and hopefully, you know, strong returns over that journey. But I think structures like SEIS and EIS are really good at trying to de-risk that to some extent, with the upfront tax relief, with the loss reliefs that you can claim as the investment goes according to plan or doesn't go according to plan. But I would say advice would be to diversify, take a well-balanced approach. Don't put all your money in venture, put an allocation in there. But yeah, using things like the EIS and SEIS products are great ways of investing that are have a number of advantages over just going through your ISA onto the stock market.
Clearly, I would agree with all of that, Matt. So thanks very much.
I thought you might, Mark. I thought so.
I don't have vested interest at all, but no, it's great to hear about the fund and what the great work you guys are doing. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. If people want to find out more from you guys, obviously they can find you on the website. They can see your open offers on our pages on the website as well, and find out a bit more about the funds. But thank you very much, Matt. Thanks very much, Kouj. We'll hopefully see you again sometime soon.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, Mark.